Hi. Welcome to day 436. I want to show you something first. This is just a little aside. We'll see if I can show you. This is, I don't know if you can see it. This is a beautiful new quilt that my mama made me and just gave to me. Isn't it beautiful? And for those of you who know quilting, you may be able to appreciate, look at all the little pieces, the flowers, the shapes that she had to individually sew together. For those of you who know Ricky Timms, this is a Ricky Timms quilt pattern that she made it for me. It's lovely. I want to both use it and protect it. So we'll see, see what happens. If I leave it on the bed like that, the doggy will be jumping on it with her claws. So we'll see what I end up doing with it, but it's beautiful. So again, welcome to day 436. Of course, you were looking at Nti First Peter, the last part of that, and the very first part of Nti Second Peter. And I love the two Nti Peters. Of course, you've been listening to my audio teachings from the Nti Peters. So I don't need to go into a lot, but I do want to emphasize a little. So the first thing I want to look at is in Nti First Peter chapter 4, verses 7 to 11. And this is where it's talking about fear. It says, to live without fear is to live without imagining. This is to stay in the now and in the heart of true desire. By keeping the mind in the now and in the true purpose of know thyself, there is no imagining. And so there is no imagining of fear. Whenever fear seems to come over you, ask, what am I doing now? You will see that you are imagining, and you are imagining fearfully. So that's something I wanted to share because that was an extremely helpful tip to me. As I went through what I call my purification process, which was letting go of a lot of false beliefs. Also, I think what brought up a lot of fear was letting go of self-will and learning just to tune into intuition and do as intuition guided rather than my will. That brought up a lot of fear. So as I was experiencing fear, one of the things that was really helpful to me was what I just read to you. Stop, pause, and say, what am I doing now? There were two things that I would notice. One was whatever I was physically doing was perfectly safe. Maybe I was just sitting in a chair. Maybe I was just walking from my bedroom to my kitchen. Maybe I was just doing dishes or buying groceries. But I was safe. And yet I was feeling all of this fear. The second thing I would notice when I would ask, what am I doing now? Is I was imagining some future state. Like I was imagining that if I continue to follow this guidance, I'm going to end up out of money and disaster is going to happen. Or if I continue to follow this guidance, it's going to guide me to do something crazy. It's going to guide me to go with a person who is not trustworthy and I'm going to be murdered or something like that, right? All kinds of crazy things that were imagined. But always, I was safe. I was sitting in a chair, walking across my house, doing dishes, buying groceries, and the fear was coming from the story in the mind. So that's really important to see. It's really important to see that fear comes from our imagining. It's because our attention is on this imaginary story in the mind about something in the future, and we are feeling fear. Because if we can really see that fear is imagining, we can let go of fear and we can just be happy and content in this moment as it is now. So again, to live without fear is to live without imagining. This is to stay in the now and in the heart of true desire. By keeping the mind in the now and in the true purpose of know thyself, there is no imagining. And so there is no imagining of fear. Whenever fear seems to come over you, ask, what am I doing now? You will see that you are imagining and that you are imagining fearfully. It also says fear is an action verb. By seeking the action of participating, which is keeping your attention on the imaginary story, by ceasing the action of participating, you cease the action of fear. This you can do by letting it rise over you without your participation. So a story may show up, an emotion may show up, but you don't want to focus your attention on it. If you need to, of course, you always have that superconductor process or that rest, accept, and trust process. And let me share another possibility. I was actually listening to an old, very old Regina Dawn Akers audio this morning, or maybe it was yesterday morning, but while I was walking the dog. And I heard me talk about something I used to do even before I knew about rest, accept, and trust. What I said that I would do whenever fear or unworthiness or guilt or something like that came over me is I would blow. Right? I would blow. The image came, I believe, from the very first message I ever scribed with the Holy Spirit, which if I remember the date correctly from the audio, I would never remember it if I hadn't heard the audio recently. But I think the date in the audio was November 8th, 2004, the very first scribal message ever. And in that scribal message, if I remember correctly, it talked about blowing away the clouds of darkness whenever they would come over me. And so I started taking that quite literally. And in my practice, when I felt guilt, when I felt unworthiness, when I felt fear, I did not yet know rest, accept, and trust. But I would just blow it away. And I think I heard myself say something like, sometimes I had to do that for 20 minutes. Who knows, maybe I was doing it. The way I remember when self-hatred first came over me to let it go. Of course, this was before my first scribal message. When self-hatred came over me, the way I remember that is that took like 2 months of letting it rise and go away and rise and go away. And this would have been before I received the scribal message that told me to, so I wasn't doing that. But what I remember about that was it was like there was this one little cell right behind my ear that was reminding me that the self-hatred was coming up to be healed. And what I did was I kept my faith with that little cell. It's interesting because years and years later, like, 17, 18 years later, I learned that the heart receives wisdom from consciousness, and that the heart then sends that wisdom up to the brain through what is called the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve ends right here. That's where it enters the brain, and then whatever information the heart received from consciousness, that's where it sends it into the brain. And I thought, isn't that interesting? So this little cell right here that I felt telling me that this self-hatred was rising up in order to be let go, that would have been received from consciousness into the heart, passed up through the vagus nerve, and that's why I heard it right here. So I was putting my faith in something very real, something that we call often the Holy Spirit or inner spiritual wisdom. But I was listening to that inner spiritual wisdom, putting my faith with that inner spiritual wisdom, and letting this self-hatred rise over me. I was staying out of the way, not interfering with it, in effect, being the superconductor before I knew about the superconductor, right? But anyway, I just wanted to share that technique. So now you have several techniques. You know, you can trust that it's coming up to be healed. You can gently blow the clouds of darkness away. You can practice the superconductor. You can practice rest, accept, and trust. All right, back to the reading. I also wanted to read something to you. This is Nti Second Peter, which is what we are just getting into, right? It's our newest book. Of course, Nti Second Peter tells us abundance is full awareness of your divine nature. That's what abundance is, full awareness of your divine nature. What I wanted to focus on is in 2 Peter chapter 1, starting with verses 16 to 18. It says, it is through witness that you know. That which you taste as witness cannot be forgotten. Sometimes this term is called direct experience. That which you have a direct experience of, you know. That which you taste as witness cannot be forgotten, for that which you witness is a part of you. So again, Nti Second Peter is about true abundance, which is knowing our divine nature. And so the way that we know our divine nature is we taste it as witness. Taste it as witness. This is what our previous form of meditation, the loving consciousness meditation, and our current form of meditation, awareness, watching awareness, is all about. It's about going in, focusing on consciousness, focusing on awareness, focusing on isness, and staying with it, tasting it, recognizing that's what I am. You know, at the same time that we're practicing awareness, watching awareness, there are thoughts going by. And of course, we hear the directions from the audio. You know, Rev Karen says, if there are thoughts, ignore the thoughts, right? We don't want to get caught up in the thoughts. Instead, you know, the thoughts are going by, but we're keeping our attention with consciousness, with awareness, with I am presence. It's the same thing. I am presence. And we're tasting it as witness, realizing this is what I am. This is how we're waking ourselves up. We're getting to know our abundance, our divine nature directly through the meditation. It is through witness that you know. That which you taste as witness cannot be forgotten, for that which you witness is a part of you. Therefore, do not try to understand or comprehend or imagine without witnessing. In other words, you can't learn to know your divine nature from a book, even a good book like Nti, right? It's through this meditation, this awareness, watching awareness, or the previous loving consciousness meditation, that you come to know yourself. Do not try to understand or comprehend or imagine without witnessing. I love this sentence. Let go of trying and relax into allowing. You know, in our first few awareness, watching awareness audios, there's a tip at the beginning of the audio, and the tips are about relaxing, right? About relaxing into the meditation. And that's what these instructions say too. Let go of trying and relax into allowing. Through allowing, you shall witness. Through witnessing, you shall know. Isn't that gorgeous? It also says, within you there is a star. This star is a very bright light. It was not made by you, but it was given to you as that which you could not lose. This is the key to your abundance. Now, if I remember correctly, when I was teaching back in whatever year I was teaching, that audio that we listened to over the last weekend, and I covered this section, I referred to that star as your willingness, as your true desire, as your spiritual aspiration. And that's a wonderful starting place to see the star as that. But the truth is, the star is more than that. The star is your awareness, your consciousness, which you can't lose. You know, even in your most insane days, when you're totally caught up in ego and acting out ego, there's still awareness there. Right? So you can't lose your awareness. So this says, within you, there is a star. That's your present, everyday awareness. This star is a very bright light. It was not made by you, but it was given to you as that which you could not lose. This is the key to your abundance. This is the key to getting to know your full divine self. This is the prophecy that must be fulfilled, for this star is you, and it is all that is true about you. That's an amazing sentence too, right? It's all that's true about you. You know, I can tell you all kinds of stories about Regina and who she is and what her history is, and maybe I could tell you about dreams she has for the future. But the only thing that's really true about me, those are all just stories. That's all just thought, appearance. The only thing that's true about me is the awareness. And you see, you have that same truth. We share one truth. Everything else emanates from the star, right? Consciousness creates everything, be it seen or unseen, perceived in truth or misperceived. But the star, the consciousness, the awareness is your truth. And that is abundance. Through knowing the star, you remember your truth. So again, this is what our meditation is all about. And also, you know, we've been doing a walkabout exercise just recently, which we're going to continue for a couple more days, which is knowing the freedom that comes from the unaffectedness in awareness, in consciousness, and contrasting it with, you know, not feeling quite so free when caught up in thought and perception, right? So through these walkabout exercises, as well as through our meditation, we're getting to know life, isness, awareness as what we are. So the meditations are very special. So let's look at the upcoming week. The upcoming week is pretty exciting. We're going to continue with Nti Second Peter until we finish it. On day 438, instead of reading, you will listen to an audio from Nti Second Peter. And then this weekend, you will listen to another audio from Nti Second Peter and an audio from Nti First John. We'll also on day 440 start reading Nti First John. So we're going to finish Second Peter, go into First John. You'll of course have walkabout exercises. First, doing the same contrast that we recently did, noticing when we're paying attention to awareness, there's an unaffected feeling that feels free, hopefully. And when we're caught up, engrossed in thought, engrossed in the world, there's not the unaffected feeling. There's not the sense of freedom. We'll do that for a couple more days. And then on day, it looks like 439, we're going to start noticing where our attention is and noticing that our experience comes from where our attention is. So for example, if I'm caught up in some fear story about the future, my experience of fear is coming from my attention being there. If I am caught up in some stressful thoughts about work, like, oh, if I don't get this done, everybody's going to think I'm a loser, my experience comes from that. If my attention is with isness, life awareness, my experience, that joy, that freedom comes from that. So we'll be looking at that a little bit, paying attention to the fact that my direct right now experience is coming from where my attention is right now. Attention is the taster of the witness, right? It's the tongue of consciousness. And then to me, this is very exciting. Starting on day 441, we're going to be practicing an exercise that I call meditative loving consciousness. Or meditative loving all. I've shared with you the loving all method. I talked about it a little bit again last week in my video, where you love everything. If you find that you can't love it, you accept it. If you find you can't accept it, you emotionally allow it. Well, this exercise is doing something very similar, but it is doing it in more of a meditative way. It's while sitting down, being quiet. You'll notice there's several steps to it. On day 341, you're going to be looking for a person that you have maybe a grievance against, or some kind of not so good feelings. On day 442, you're going to do it with a situation or a circumstance that you don't feel so good about. And you'll notice the first step is going to be to accept your feelings. So if I have a grievance against a person, or let's say I think a person annoys me, so I feel very annoyed by a particular person, then what I will do is I will accept that feeling that I have of annoyance. And instead of resisting that I feel annoyed, wishing I didn't feel annoyed, I accept my feelings of annoyance. And once I feel that I can accept my feeling of annoyance, I love my feeling of annoyance. And again, one way that this can happen is loving that I have a consciousness that allows me to have experience like annoyance, right? Loving that anything can be here, any experience can be here, and it's okay. Whatever is helpful to you, you stay with this step until you can love your feelings about the person. And then the next step is shifting to the person itself. And you practice accepting that person exactly as they are. In my heart, I often give them the allowance to be what I call the free Son of God, from the language of Nti and A Course in Miracles. They're free to make whatever choices they want, to believe whatever they want. And I allow that freedom by accepting them as they are. And then next is what is going on and loving that person, or really feeling love while thinking of the person, right? Allowing yourself to feel the feeling of love while holding the image of that person in your mind. So this is what I call the meditative loving all method. So you're going to start practicing that this week too. That's a lot of fun. So, and of course, we're going to continue with the awareness, watching awareness meditation too. So that's all I have for you today. I will see you again next week. Have a wonderful week finishing 2 Peter and starting Nti 1 John. Bye.